5 minutes to showtime. 5-minute warning. Two-minute warning, 2 minutes to live time.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
The future is uncertain. I know this. Death is inevitable. I know this. But one thing is certain. As free men, it is our right to live unencumbered and in peace. And those times are quickly drawing to an end. And in these times, peace is certainly an illusion. And as the chains grow tighter, our ability to slip those chains increase incrementally with every passing moment. Inaction is no longer an option. It's time to raise our voices like a cacophony of thunder and lightning and tell the masters no more. This is Nighthawk, and I say, for myself, no more. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because the freedom is slipping away.
Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. We're coming to you live through the America Free Radio studios, through Revolution Radio on the West Coast. #1 listener-supported radio network in the country. So go to revolutionradio.com or freedomslips.com. And make sure you have revenue to keep the lights on. This is a 2-hour program. We cover a lot of news in a short amount of time. We have a break at the top of the hour only. If you want to contribute to the program with your pontifications and your great ideas, go to youtube.com and join the chat room. And by the way, Moverling has already made a generous contribution tonight. And yes, it's going to be a great show tonight. So I appreciate that very much, Eric. Good to see you, William Boo. Thank goodness a moderator is here because we have a lot going on. We are streaming tonight live, not only on Revolution Radio, but also on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Twitch, all at the same time. If you like what you see here tonight, share it with your friends. Let's grow this message. All right, let's get started. I want to talk a little bit about new Space Force doctrine. It has just been released. It'd be good to talk about it a little bit. I'm sure you're ready for a break from what's been going on out there in the crazy news with, what is it, Millie-Vanilla and their lip-synced presidential campaign. I think it's going to be kind of, we might cover that a little. Depends on what the chat room wants to do. The U.S. Space Force, a couple of days ago, they issued a new guiding document. I'm going to cover a little bit of that guiding document tonight because it could mean job opportunities for you or your friends or even your kids. The document, titled Space Power, lays out a vision for what the space branch of the armed services will do, and it explains why the United States considers space, unfortunately, a domain of warfare, because that's what it is. This is the Space Force capstone doctrine, and it would be nice for you to be informed on it so that you know what's going on. This is not something that's going to end anytime soon. It's not a whimsical game of politics. This is the future of the human race. And believe me, it's a race with a capital R. Not just the human race, but also the race of humans into the stars. Last week, we had 3 countries launch spacecraft to Mars. Yeah, a lot going on in space. Why? Because it's the high ground, Earth explorers. It's the high ground. And he who controls the high ground will control Earth. So the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force have a set of principles for operation on land and the sea and the air on Earth. Okay, we already have that well defined. We've fought in those spaces for hundreds of years. Space Force is now developing its own theories and its own concepts about how to work in space. Not only the weightlessness of space, but also on the surface of the moon, on asteroids, relocating asteroids, turning asteroids into space stations, and then expanding using advanced fuels and advanced materials to Mars and beyond into the asteroid belt. I wrote a book about it called Asteroid Mining, the Future of Energy, and you would not believe the bounty that is out there, just like the gold rush was in California in the 1840s, and exactly what's going to happen with space. Space Force was established on December 20th, 2019, a little less than a year ago, as a separate branch of the Armed Services under the Department of the Air Force. And up until now, the only doctrine for space operations existed in the Air Force. And as an Air Force veteran myself, I can tell you that it is loaded with politics. And the closer you get and to the inside of the Pentagon, the greater the politics get. And I'm sorry to say, but the way the ranking is set up in the Air Force, to make it to full bird, you have to usually come from the Air Force Academy. Get up to light bird without that, up to the ranks. But in order to get to full bird, 1-star, 2-star, and up into the generals, you have to go to the Air Force Academy, which means you're going to be steeped in the deep state of the Air Force. The Navy has the same thing, and so does the Army. Marines are the only ones that seem to be a little bit isolated from that. For some reason, they don't get involved into politics in the Pentagon. So this is a 64-page capstone document. We're not going to go through all of it, but we're going to go through some highlights so that you know what's going on. The doctrine says the United States must have military capabilities in space to protect our national assets, such as communication, GPS satellites, all of that, as well as offensive weapons to deter adversaries from hostile actions. You know, and I know, the best defense is a good offense. If you have the ability to hit somebody back hard, they're going to be less likely to hit you in the first place. And we have long since had a doctrine of peace through superior firepower. That doesn't always hold true, as we're going to cover in the second hour tonight. We have had superior firepower, and we chose not to take the path of peace. But when I say we, I'm going to be very clear as to who that was, why it was done, and what was done. And I don't think you're going to be happy about it, but at least you're going to know the truth. That's one of the reasons why you tune into this program, because you hear so much of the movie out there. You want to grab your popcorn. The only difference between a movie and what's going on your news media 24 hours a day, and now it's spilled over into every online media as well. Yes, you can find truth on Twitter and Facebook and Twitch and YouTube. You can find it, but you can also find propaganda, and there's a load of it out there. But the difference between that movie and what we're going through right now is, in this real life, people are dying. People are starving. People are stealing money, and people are being robbed of that money, and they're being discriminated against right and left. If it is a movie, we don't like being extras in the movie, do we? So Raymond is the leader of this. His name is Chief of Space Operations. That is several notches above the Deputy Chief Director of Paper Towels. He is the Chief of Space Operations. His name is General John J. Raymond. I'm going to talk about what he said here. He serves as commander of U.S. Space Command, insists that the United States wants space to remain a peaceful environment. He says our goal is not to get into a conflict. We want to deter the conflict, which means you have to be one step ahead of those that would be your enemy. But if deterrence were to fail, we need to protect our ability to conduct the joint and coalition fight. And it's not going to be easy to do. There have been lots and lots of TV shows about it. I think probably the most painfully realistic one is the recent one called The Expanse. How many people out there have seen The Expanse? Yes? Show of hands. That's really, really well done. Good script. Intelligent people to put that together. Started out as a game, and the game inventor actually wrote the first script and did it on Sci-Fi Channel. Did really well the first season, but that was it. And then Amazon picked it up and it went from there. Or Netflix picked it up and it went on from there. And I'm thoroughly, thoroughly impressed with it. So he said the space doctrine was a grassroots effort written by a group of about 20 officers from the rank of colonel down to tech sergeant. They got together on their own and they wrote this 64-page document. The document will serve as a frame of reference for current leaders and for the development of training and education programs going forward. Before its release, Spacepower was reviewed by the Defense Department and shared with leaders of allied nations. We're not saying that it provides all the answers, but we think it's a great start, and I think it'll drive an intellectual conversation on space power in the years ahead. Doctrine is not a stagnant thing, it continues to evolve. I would suggest from colonel down to tech sergeant and Brooks Agnew. Yeah, you need to have me on that team. You need to have me on that team. So space power, and the reason I say this, it is both civilian and it's military. And you can't just have industrialists. You can't just have Elon Musk. You can't just have, Bigelow or Bezos, or you can't just have these big, mega, global billionaire industrialists. You have to have futurists like me. Like me. It doesn't have to be me. I'd prefer it to be me. I have the experience to do it. But it needs to be someone like me, a civilian like me, who can see into the future, not necessarily with a vision, but we have read enough and we've studied enough and we've experienced enough of the science fiction world to know that science fiction is the doormat of real future. Everything from Jules Verne to, Gene Roddenberry, Isaac Asimov, and so forth. We have visions of the future because we have dreamed it and we've written it and we've made films about it, and generations of people have learned it. It's become part of our space psyche. And this kind of wisdom, this kind of thought process, call it a thought experiment, if you will, needs to be part of the dialect. That's all I'm saying. And the dialogue. The space doctrine is organized into 5 sections, okay? And I'm going to briefly cover these 5 sections during this hour. The first is the space domain. Second is the national space power, the military space power, the employment of space forces, and the last is military space forces. All of these things work together. They cannot work one without the other. You can't just have military forces up there. You also have to have commercial space forces up there. You have to have fueling stations, repair stations, logistics. You have to have GPS satellites. You have to have mining equipment. You have to have repair facilities, medical facilities. All this can't be military. It has to run at a profit. That means there has to be something up there besides, 23 degrees Kelvin, the cold blackness of space. Helium-3 is up there. Platinum, gold, all kinds of, do you know what a mountain of ice is worth in space? It's worth more than gold on Earth. It is, because you could make lots of stuff from ice. Yes. You can make martinis from it, but you can also make oxygen and fuel and all kinds of other things with that supply. And so it's very, very valuable, and it's hard to find in space because it tends to freeze dry and sublimate. A central theme across the document is that the success of the Space Force depends on its ability to coordinate strategy and operations, we call it tactics, with the other U.S. military services and international allies. Because not all those allies are going to be in space. India, maybe. Jamaica, no. China, yes. Are they going to be our allies? Maybe not. That's a really good question. Maybe China will be, but the CCP may not be. You understand where this is going? Russia, Livonia, Kazakhstan, all these countries are capable of putting great technology into space. Pakistan, Brazil, other nations, France, certainly Britain, and they need to work together. What does that mean? Well, how about a common computer language? That would be nice, wouldn't it? So that we have redundancy. We have the ability to stand on the shoulders of rudimentary things like software and boards and communication systems and reach further into space rather than competing with one another to see who has the best display and who has the best operating system on their phone. Military space power achieves its greatest potential when it is integrated with other forms of military power. It's true because, as I said, the high ground is the one that controls Earth. You cannot move more than one or two people anywhere on planet Earth without being noticed from space with the right equipment. If you put my Sentinel, which is a suborbital platform that flies at about 120,000 feet, it flies in a geosynchronous orbit, free from turbulence, and it can sit over a city for years. It can monitor every square centimeter of that city, every sidewalk, every rooftop, every radio communication, every infrared signature. It can track all the bad guys, every single one of them. Once they're located, it will never lose them. No bad thing will happen on the ground underneath a Sentinel, not without having some kind of retribution. Yes, it means there's a big brother up there, but there are some cities in this world where you need a big brother. You need a big brother up there to protect you. There wouldn't be violent riots. There wouldn't be shootings in Chicago. There wouldn't be piracy at sea. There wouldn't be terrorism at airports. You know why? Because bad things are done by bad people. Bad things are not done by good people. Bad things are done by bad people. And everyone knows or should know, that it's the same bad people every single time. By the time a bad person reaches the age of 25, they already have a record. We already know what they're capable of doing. We already know what they've done. By the time they hit 30, 35, 40, they've been in prison 2, 3, 4, 5 times. They're the people that are doing the bad stuff. I know you all have complained to me in the past about our prison system. Oh, we have more people in prison in the United States than any other country. Not true. We have more people incarcerated, but we definitely don't have more people in prison. There are countries whose people are in prison. There are countries that have workforces that are made up of slaves. That's a prison. We don't have that in this country. We have roughly about 1% of our population is in prison, in and out, but about 1%. And sociologically speaking, that's about right. About 98, 99% of the people will obey the law. They won't take something that doesn't belong to them if it's sitting on a park bench unattended. Why? Because it's not in our nature. We don't do it. But there's about 1% of the population. If you turn your head for a second, if you loosen your grip for a moment, they will take it from you. If you're holding on too tight, they'll kill you, take it from you, even if it's just a pair of tennis shoes. These are bad people. Bad people do bad things. Bad things are done by bad people. Sentinel would watch all of that. Well, a Sentinel is way, way cheaper than being in space, and it can only be at one place at one time. You can set it over Baghdad. You can set it over Chicago. You could set it over Louisiana. You could watch. You could be the 24-hour day, 7-day a week, all bands, all frequencies, all the time, police. And you could take care of business. You could protect your society. But if it's hovering over St. Louis, it can't be in Baghdad in 2 hours. It's a Sentinel. It's designed to stay in one place, geosynchronous orbit. But when we're in space, we are no more than 1 hour from any place on the planet. Any place on the planet. No ship, no plane, no submarine, No missile could be successful when a offensive country that has ability to control that upper space, low Earth orbit, they won't allow it to happen. The Department of Defense, the U.S. military services, partner agencies, and allies, the command plan says, have the responsibility, and I quote, of protecting and defending U.S. and, as directed, allied partner and critical commercial space operational capabilities, close quote. That means like the open ocean. You know, we have a lot of drayage, a lot of ships going back and forth on the ocean. They have shipping containers, they have passengers, they have supplies of all kinds, oil and finished goods and raw materials. It is the responsibility of the powers of the earth to make sure that that shipping leaves its port safely, notwithstanding any kind of mechanical problems or severe weather or whatever, a big tidal wave, gets to its destination safely without being molested by pirates. That's what the U.S. Navy does. The U.S. Navy sails the seven seas and makes sure that we have peace. But it can't be everywhere. You can't just steam a carrier group anywhere you want to steam it. And there are now weapons so sophisticated that it can really make life rough on a carrier group. Humanity has long been drawn to space. We have dreamed about it. We've written about it. We've laid on our back and camping in our lawn chairs out in the country, and we've looked at it. We've pondered the mysteries since, 800 BC. We are defined by our hunger to explore the universe. That's what we are. We are explorers. And when we run out of frontier, when we run out of wilderness to which to flee, then we have war. Because our society is such, even if we're just tribal in nature, a few 100,000 living on the earth, or a few billion living on the earth, when we run out of space, when we run out of energy or food, when we run out of clean water, when we run out of the ability to walk over the hill, to be free, to move about freely, then we have conflict. We have conflict between our government and our people, and between one people and another people. History has shown that to us. And although we might think it's a natural way to reduce the population of Earth, we are eternal beings having a mortal experience. We will be back. Although I have to say, at least with all the information that I have at my disposal now, I don't think this planet has ever had as many souls alive on it at one time as it does right now. And I could tell you, in my opinion, and it's semi-professional, I don't think the Earth is overcrowded right now. I really don't. I don't think we're managing it well. I mean, if we could get just one or two more countries to take out the damn trash and to do something with their sewage, this planet would be gorgeous. It would be. One or two, maybe three countries more just learn to handle their garbage and their sewage like we do, like Russia does, like Europe does, then it would be a pretty clean planet. And I would have to say, with respect to distribution of energy, maybe we've gone about it the wrong way. Pumping energy out over regulated wires and telling people where you can live and cannot live based on the way we distribute energy. It leaves vast portions of this planet uninhabited. It also forces us or encourages us to live in mega cities, Bombay, Shanghai, Beijing, New York, LA. Mankind maybe wasn't meant to live this way, In the beginning of America and the beginning of Europe, it was agrarian. We farmed. We had, 40 acres and a mule. We had the ability to raise our own food. Of course, our lifestyles kind of changed in the sense that we didn't want to spend all day getting something to eat and a clean glass of water. We wanted to do other things. So we hired somebody to take care of the clean drinking water for everybody in the town. And then rather than going and digging a well and trying to manage that and keep it from caving in on itself and pumping the water and filtering the water to get enough to take a bath after we heat it up on a stove, we just turn the hot water on, right? And it gives us time to do other things. And that's what society has done. We've differentiated. We have differentiated, and companies have made themselves successful doing things that other people don't want to do, right? Somebody's got to treat the water. Somebody's got to take care of the sewage management plant. Somebody's got to drive the trash truck, right? There are whole industries that have made themselves successful by doing things other people don't want to do. I did it myself. When I was in college, before I got my first degree, I did things no one else wanted to do. And I was good at it, and I made money at it, only so much. Of course, education is much better. It greatly improves your ability to earn a living. Until you get to a certain point, then it renders you unemployable. But it still doesn't mean you can't earn a living. The drive to push back the dark edges of the map and demystify our frontiers, it's what we have done forever. That's why we sail the seas. That's why we climb the mountains. That's why we go caving. And it is why we go to space. As long as we have a frontier, as long as we have a wilderness to which to flee, we can avoid war. Once the great powers of the world competed for technology or technological supremacy in outer space to demonstrate the superiority of their societies. I mean, to win was to be the fastest, to be the highest, to go the furthest, to be the first on the moon. And the United States and its allies firmly won that early space race. But just because we won it doesn't mean you can quit, which is what we did. I mean, yeah, we have almost 100 active space programs, but as far as putting men, women on the moon, as far as building a colony on another world, we stopped doing that. We were there in the mid-70s. We were there and we quit. The whole planet quit. Today, however, that competition, well, it's evolved. The equipment has gotten better. The rockets have gotten better. For one thing, the military is not the sole supplier of this technology anymore. It is now private industry. It is now competition. And I have to tell you, gold rush is on, baby. The gold rush is on. Helium-3, gold, platinum, all kinds of raw materials out there that could not only help our planet, but help other worlds develop. It's out there for the taking, and there's nothing in our way but the ability to dream big enough. Our destiny as a free world is to strive even higher in space, and it remains the same in us. Maybe my generation's past doing it. I know very good and well I'm not going to space. But when I was 14 years old, it's what I wanted to do. When I was asked in the 8th grade what I wanted to be when I grew up, I didn't hesitate. I want to be an asteroid miner. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Somebody got afraid. Somebody backed off. Somebody said, let's just stay here and make our money. How about that? We'll have a few wars while we're at it, but we'll make some money. The benefits to life on Earth from the exploitation and exploration of space, they are inescapable, Earth explorers. Never again will our way of living, even at its most fundamental levels, the way we nourish ourselves, the way we medically treat ourselves, the way we live, the way we die, the way we think about life and life beyond. Everything changed. Everything changed. Nothing is untouched by the technological marvels orbiting our planet. Oh yeah, it's an upgrade for me. I mean, the smartphone, yeah, it's definitely an upgrade for me. But the next generation, they're hardwired to it. You know, you try to tell your kids what the flip side of an album is or what clockwise means, or none of that means anything to them. When I was little, we never had the word click. There was no mouse. There was no like, okay, right click, left click. That wasn't in our lexicon. Now we do it, but it's an upgrade. But the next generation is beyond that. It's changed us. We've created a neural network around our planet right now that is connecting peoples that would never have spoken. People are falling in love on this world that would never have met. They would never have seen each other, heard each other's voices, written to each other, exchanged ideas. Would never have happened. Hong Kong would not be waving American flags and singing the national anthem wanting freedom if they had never seen it. But they did. They saw it on their smart devices. Our draw to explore the unknown, our human love for uncovering mysteries and sweeping away our ignorance, it's a drive in every one of us. Every farmer understands the wonder of breaking ground and planting seeds and waiting for the rain and then watching wealth jump out of the ground, reach for the sun. Every single student understands the thrill of being able to solve problems, of being able to look at things microscopic or look deep into space at things that happened billions of years ago. It's only possible if we secure the domain of orbital flight. Our look outward is our look inward. Okay? The fundamental desire to know our place among the stars, it's in all of us. Human activity and expansion across the domain, it's not inevitable. It is quite possible. The success of these endeavors is only possible if we secure the peaceful use of space. If a dominant warrior class goes into space and prevents others, or takes over or pirates things that other people put in space, we've lost it, and we may never get it back. You understand where we are? We're at a point of critical development in the development of, let's call it, the fetus of humanity. You know, during the development of a fetus, there's critical periods during that gestation period. If the mother doesn't get the right nourishment, if she's under stress, if she doesn't get enough water, or she's subjected to some violent event like a car wreck or violence of some kind, that baby never develops that piece again. It goes on to the next thing. It goes on to the liver, it goes on to the bones. The lungs are the last thing to be developed. That's why children that are born premature always have breathing problems, because the lungs are the last thing to develop. Everything has a critical period, even in human society, and we're there. If we let a warrior class or a tyrant class go into space and dominate space because we're too wrapped up worrying about social programs here on Earth, then we will be enslaved for 100 generations. The space domain is the area above the altitude where atmospheric effects on airborne objects becomes negligible. It is somewhere around 200 miles. Actually, Earth's atmosphere extends all the way to the moon. Yeah, it's about 240,000 miles out. But it's so thin out there. It's just gas particles caught in a Earth sheath of solar wind. But as you get closer to Earth, the atmosphere becomes more and more dense. At about 200, 220, 240 miles, a ship can orbit Earth for a long time without that orbit decaying. Occasionally it will have to speed up because it is running into things and it is affected by solar wind, etc., and it's eventually going to slow down a little bit and the orbit will decay. But, you know, satellites that we launched a long time ago, they should have already fallen to Earth. They should have already burned up in the atmosphere. They haven't. You know why? It's because the atmosphere of Earth is thinning. Yes, it's thinning. It's blowing away in the solar wind. See, the atmosphere of Earth is built up by solar activity. Earth requires and captures particles that are thrown at it by the sun. The sun has coronal mass ejections. It has sunspots with magnetic filaments that snap, and these particles go lashing out into space. If they're directed toward Earth, they're captured in Earth's gravitational field, and they build up our atmosphere in the form of cosmic rays and highly charged particles in our upper atmosphere that will eventually neutralize and settle down. But the sun's been very quiet since before 2012. And it has not sent enough particles to our atmosphere to build it up. And so it has been streaming down. What does this mean? Well, it means that satellites that would normally be dragging against that atmosphere slow down and fall to Earth, they're still up there. GPS satellites that were supposed to give up 10 years ago, they're still up there. They're still running. We're obviously making more profit because of that. And it has given room for other companies to develop things like CubeSats, which are small little 300 kilogram satellites that can be put up into space. And we're putting them up as rapidly as we can by the dozens and dozens every single month so that we can build new web links in space so we don't have to use cell towers on the ground to have internet. We can do it from space. That being said, it also affects our weather. With the thinning atmosphere, it means that we have hotter summers because the infrared radiation of the sun comes straight through and strikes the ground. It strikes our skin. It makes us hot. It makes our summers hotter. And we're setting records in the northern and southern hemisphere. But it also means the winters are colder. We're also setting cold records, snowfall records, freezing records. Winters are longer and they're more severe. That means we're having extremes both ways. Hotter summers, colder winters. Why? Because we don't have the insulative qualities of the atmosphere. It means that Earth is free to radiate its energy back out into space. There's nothing to stop it. There are no greenhouse gases built up in the atmosphere. It's just going out into space. Hence, we are headed toward probably an ice age unless the sun gets jiggy with it. And that's not happening. And we don't see it happening in the near future. That's why we need to be getting into space. There are things we have to do in order to survive as a race, the way that we're surviving now. We certainly can survive, but it means that the habitable zone, the farming zone is going to shrink. It's going to move southward and northward toward the equator between 150 and 180 miles. Think of it. North Dakota, South Dakota, maybe parts of Nebraska and Kansas, they're going to be covered in ice. No growing there. Take a look at a globe sometime. Take a look. You'll see. If you look at Earth, you'll see that the area of the center of the Earth, the middle section of the Earth, if I can pull up Earth in my feed so you can see it. Okay, here we go. So if you look at Earth, you'll notice that the farmable land, once you move the growing zone 150 to 180 miles closer to the equator, it's kind of skinny. It's not really enough land to feed the world. It's not like the wide open plains of Washington State, North Dakota, and Minnesota and Wisconsin. Not like that. You don't get Iowa anymore. You don't get Nebraska anymore. All that's going to be covered in ice. Same thing in South America. You don't get Brazil anymore. You got to move up. You got to move north toward the equator. That means, you're probably talking Venezuela, and they're not in too good a shape right now, right? They've had a massive shutdown of their government. Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. Places are not very well organized right now. You think they're able to feed the world? No, I don't think so. That's why it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of planning to make sure the human race can survive. Not only are space operations global, They are also multi-domain, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. These domains. What are they? Well, we have, interesting to think about that. We have a physical dimension of the space domain, and it encompasses the orbital environment and the spacecraft operating within that domain. This dimension starts in the upper reaches of Earth's atmosphere, intersecting and extending beyond the physical location required for sustained orbital flight. Gravity shapes the invisible terrain and the space domain. It goes out to about, 164,000 miles is our equatorial longitude, and these geostationary satellites are out about 12,500 miles, so it goes out a ways. Now, once placed in orbit, most spacecraft never return to Earth. Not in one piece anyway. We just don't salvage them. We let them burn up, fall into the sea. Military spacecraft are forward employed for the duration of their lifespan. This makes onboard expendables and consumables and spacecraft reliability the primary determinants of mission duration. Space was once a sanctuary from attack, but the emergence, advanced development, and proliferation of a wide range of demonstrated counter-space weapons by potential adversaries, it has reversed this paradigm. In other words, we could shoot satellites down from the ground. And I think with what the Russians did the other day, we could shoot satellites down from orbit. Kind of changes the game. There's a network dimension of space, and this allows users to command, control, and exploit space capabilities through a physical and logical architecture that collects, transmits, and processes data. We're talking about GPS satellites. We're talking about radio. We're talking about all kinds of data transfer and storage. And a lot of the information that's being handled up there is being handled by fairly open source software, Linux and other pieces of software like this, which means they're open to cyber attack. And that is ongoing. Think about it. Think about it. A CubeSat weighing 330, 340 kilograms. It has enough hydrazine on it. This is a powdered kind of dry gas retro rocket. You piezoelectrically push it into a catalytic converter. It catalyzes, pushes out, and redirects the satellite to stay in orbit and makes small corrections. But what if that satellite were to be hacked from the ground and somebody said, turn on your retro rocket and launch yourself across orbit and smash into 4 other satellites? You know what a mess that would be? That would be like turning a 2-year-old loose in a glass menagerie shop with a baseball bat. Not a pretty thing. We would never get space back. This needs to be stopped, needs to be prevented from ever happening. And the Space Force, the last meeting that I went to, that was pre-Space Force, it was at Fort Bragg, there was a General Salt there, like table salt. And his colonel, very, very concerned about cybersecurity. I mean, like worried. You don't see military men worried, but these guys were worried. And they asked me repeatedly about cybersecurity. And I had to say, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a hacker, but I can tell you right now, the stuff that we have can be hacked. Ours can be hacked. Your phone can be hacked. I guarantee you, satellites, one way or another, can be hacked. Yesterday, I heard that Intel, Intel, the little chip in your computer, Intel has a firmware backdoor that somebody just hacked, and they stole a bunch of information. They manipulated a computer server that had Intel server in it. Gosh, how many Intel chips are out there? Like 100 gazillion of them. If somebody knows how to get in the firmware of a chip, that's not the software, but that's the operating system inside the chip itself, how the software runs, that chip can be manipulated. And that means that that satellite is vulnerable. All this stuff needs to be fixed. All this stuff. That's the digital domain. The space domain's cognitive dimension, okay? It encompasses the perceptions and mental processes of those who transmit, receive, synthesize, analyze, report, decide, and act on information coming from and to the space domain. Every domain of human affairs includes a cognitive component. In other words, it's your awareness. The more aware you become, the more helpful or dangerous you can become. The prevalence of remote operations amplifies the importance of the space domain's cognitive dimension. While space is a physical location, operations, right, they're executed and they're interpreted through virtual stimuli. We don't have men up there flying satellites around. We run the satellites from here virtually. We look at it on a screen. We look at a digital simulation, or at best, a digital camera that might be on that satellite. But it's a virtual world, and it's a cognitive awareness of that virtual world that makes that system work. Space systems, at the end of the day, they're just tools that extend the ability of an individual or group or society or a state or a country or a race to perform tasks in, from, and to the space domain. That way, we don't have to worry about the vacuum of space. I can manipulate a satellite in my gym shorts in the perfect comfort of my air-conditioned home outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't have to go to space to do it. Space systems are also not static. They are moving at about 18 to 50,000 miles an hour around the planet. They're designed, employed, and exploited by thinking agents. All these associated processes include cognitive components. People must maintain the system. We'll never operate in automatic. We'll never operate in automatic. A few miles from here is Duke Energy. They have a nuclear power plant there, and they make the electricity upon which all this technology that I'm coming to you with tonight operates. Do you think that's running an automatic? No. There are people there watching screens, monitoring, walking around, filling out check sheets, reading gauges, taking temperatures, listening with their ears. Every hour of the day, there's a cognitive component to the electricity that comes in this house that I take for granted and you take for granted. That's what the Space Force is there to do. It's there to make sure all of that works for us. So I was going to tell you a little bit about the final moments of this hour. I want to tell you a little bit about a technology that we had that gave us an advantage, but it was misused. In 1945, we received information that the atomic weapon worked. And the interesting thing about this was that in May of 1945, Japan had actually surrendered. Yes, they did. They had actually surrendered. It wasn't an unconditional surrender. It was a conditional surrender, but it only had one small condition, and that was that the emperor would not be incarcerated, would not be held liable for any war crimes. It was Japan's belief that the emperor was a direct descendant of some sun goddess, but it went all the way back to like 680 BC or maybe 800 BC, 124 generations. Well, it turns out that Harry Truman also had his Harry Hopkins. You know that Roosevelt had a Harry Hopkins who was a Soviet spy, died of stomach cancer, but in the early days of the war, he was very close to President Roosevelt and influenced him in the management and conducting of World War II, and may have been responsible, probably was responsible, for the Soviets seizing control of half of Europe by stopping Patton outside of Berlin for 6 weeks. Patton was ready to go in. Russia, or not Russia, but the Soviet Union would never have built the wall, never have taken half of Berlin and Eastern Europe had Patton been allowed to continue forward. But that was not to be because of Harry Hopkins. Well, as it turns out, President Truman had an agent like this as well. And that agent pressed Harry Truman to stick to his guns and make the surrender unconditional. Japan would not agree to it. So Harry Truman wrote the executive order to drop the first bomb on Hiroshima and the second bomb on Nagasaki. These bombs were not dropped on military targets. These bombs were dropped on civilian targets. 100,000 people were vaporized. Innocent, I would say, only because they were not actual soldiers. They were women and children vaporized by these weapons. It was important to the leadership at that time, and you have to remember that when Roosevelt came to power in 1933, they had just successfully crushed Hoover in his first term. Hoover was an engineer, he was a businessman, he was a smart guy. The economy was roaring. I mean, roaring, underlined, double underlined. It was blowing and going. Everything was going great. Nobody could do any wrong. But the Democrats did not like this. The global syndicate did not like this one bit. And so they destroyed Hoover by destroying Hoover's economy. Roosevelt came in, the economy was as much as a vapor trail. It was a disaster when Roosevelt came in. So the first thing Roosevelt did is begin to establish a fascist government, which is exactly what he did, and he made no bones about it. He met with Stalin, he met with Mussolini. In fact, he exchanged many letters with Mussolini. He knew what he was doing. He set up the agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations that grew small at first, and now we have over 650 of them in our country. They write our laws. They assess our taxes. They regulate us, decide what we can do and what we cannot do, where we can go and where we cannot go, where we can build and where we cannot build. They take police actions against us and confiscate our stuff. But we have no representation in that government, none at all. Roosevelt gave it birth. Truman put it in diapers, dropped the bombs, created the military-industrial complex that we live with today. Jimmy Carter took it through adolescence and created the Senior Executive Service, an unstoppable force of permanent bureaucrats inside our government. By the time it got to Johnson, and by the time it got to Bush and Clinton and Bush, these people were so deeply rooted in our government, we call them the deep state. They are actually the government inside our government, and we're at war with them right now. We are at war with them right now, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the second hour. You need to understand the nature of this war, where it came from, who we're fighting, and what their goals are. Yes, we're expanding into space, but it's going to change the dynamic only. We need to change the philosophy. We're going to take a quick break. We take a break at the top of the hour, and then we'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away. More X Squared Radio coming at you through the America Free Radio Studios right here on Revolution Radio. Well, actually, I could take just a minute or so more. I wanted to tell you, if you bought one of my books off of my website at brooksagnew.com, and you got it from Amazon, you didn't get it with a signature. Well, you can get it with a signature now. All you need is a signature card, and I'll send it to you. You can get it for nothing, for free, just the shipping and handling. And I will sign it, and you can stick it right inside your book, and then you can have an autographed version. Got a good supply of them. You can get them at my website, brooksagnew.com. Click on the store button, and you can get yours. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away. More X Squared Radio.
to Revolution Radio at freedomslopes.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look. It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right, thanks so much for hanging out. By the way, we are streaming live, not only on Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, but we're also streaming live on YouTube, my YouTube channel, Brooks Agnew, also Facebook, also Twitter, also Twitch. So a lot of platforms going tonight. If you like one of those platforms, you're on that platform, please share and hit the like button. It spreads the word and helps us grow this audience and spread the truth. So I wanted to let you know that the North Pole Inner Earth Expedition is on. It is on for 2022. Now, it sounds like a long ways away, but back up a little bit. Our deposit for the icebreaker has to be in by November of 2021. That gives us a little over a year to raise the money to put that icebreaker in the water. And that is about $3.5 million. So it's a lot. However, keep in mind, we have about 20 million followers. 20 million followers of the North Pole Inner Earth Expedition. Unfortunately, they're not all listening tonight. You are. So you're going to help me reach them. And all you have to do is share my website with them. npiee.com. That stands for North Pole Inner Earth Expedition.com. You can join the newsletter for free. Everything that you can participate on is on there from $5 all the way to $49. A lot of ways to participate and to help make this happen. Also, all of the donations that are made in the top chat on YouTube are going to be deposited in the account that go toward this expedition. And thank you, Moverling, for another. Moverling5 is one of our loyal listeners on YouTube. And in top chat, there's a little square at the bottom of the top chat that has a dollar sign in it. You can click on that. You could put any amount in there that you want. And I would appreciate it because it goes toward the expedition and will help us to get the ball rolling. And we do have generous people, and you could be one of them. Also wanted to answer a couple of questions in the chat. By the way, Dr. Bauer, good to see you out there. He says all oil is abiotic, and I believe that is true, although I have worked on some oil fields that have played out. They were very big producers in their day, but then they played out. And when they played out, they capped the wells and moved on. But then we came back, like 30 years later, uncapped the wells, went back in, and there was more oil in there. So it could have flowed from the petroliferous zones, but I tend to believe like you do. I don't think this is all dinosaurs and old lake beds and things like that. This is the way the geologists think about it. But some of these are like 18,500 feet deep, and we even go to far underneath the floor of the Gulf of Mexico, which the water is about 5,200 feet deep. Then you get to the floor, and then you drill through that to get into these old volcanic formations that have filled with oil. So I tend to believe that the same as you. In fact, when I developed the ground probing radar, which is a system radiographically use spectra of reflection and spectrographic analysis to determine if there's oil in the ground or not and what the depth is, I sent that to NASA in the mid-90s. And in 96, the first technology of that was sent to Mars. And it was sent to Mars with the idea that I had written them that you can look for water with this. It's no problem. It will find water. You need 2 antennas to be able to tell the exact depth, but you'll at least be able to tell whether you have subterranean water or not. But after you do discover the water, I want you to change the frequencies on it to this, and I gave them the frequencies to look for, and see if there's oil on Mars. I know it sounds kind of stupid because there, as far as we know, not been any dinosaurs on Mars. But if oil is abiotic, it is a complex hydrocarbon that is made by the inner workings of a planet, then Mars will have oil on it. Yes, fossil fuels on Mars. Yeah, we can go mess up their atmosphere as well. Anyway, I tend to agree with you that it is abiotic. If you have a question for me, there's a couple of ways you can get it to me. One is to go to youtube.com, and put in my name, Brooks Agnew, and you'll go to my feed here, my live feed. And in the top chat, if you have a question, write it all in caps. That way I'll see it out of the corner of my eye, and I will address that question. Or, better way, because the chat can move, you can make a donation in top chat. That will freeze your question in a big color box for me. And it moves up the rows very slowly. And that way I can address it more better. All right, let's talk about what I want to talk about in sequence, and that is the root of all treason. Every single government official in the January 5th, 2017 meeting at the Obama White House should be FBI raided, arrested, tried, convicted and sentenced for treason and acts of sedition. It was at this meeting that Obama gave guidance to key officials who would be tasked with protecting his administration's utilization of secretly funded Clinton plot to overthrow the U.S. government. At its core was a fabricated theme that alleged Trump was involved in a treasonous plot to collude with Russia to win the 2016 election. That was fabricated. President Obama said he wants to be sure that as we engage with the incoming team, that would be the Trump team, this is Susan Rice speaking, that means Obama and Brennan and Clapper and Comey and Rice and Yates, everyone that was in this room, we are mindful to ascertain if there is any reason that we cannot share information fully as it relates to Russia. That's what she said in her email. It was kind of a cover your butt email because Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, FBI Director James Comey, and Vice President Joe Biden were in attendance in this meeting. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew exactly what they planned on doing. There was no doubt whatsoever. Nobody should have a foggy memory about having a meeting in the Oval Office after 8 years with the Commander-in-Chief. Obama personally directed high-level operatives to intensely leak selective information supporting a supposed Russia-Trump conspiracy allegation. The first targets were General Michael Flynn, and we're still going to cover a little bit of that. I covered the Flynn letter on Sunday, and you could see the levels of conflict even today as the judges were making their arguments before the appellate court to force Judge Sullivan to exonerate, that is to drop the charges, drop the case against Michael Flynn. Of course, Judge Sullivan doesn't want to do that, and this is stretching on and on and on as part of this war. Because he knows, Sullivan knows, he's assigned to keep this thing in play, because he knows as soon as it's out of play, as soon as Michael Flynn is dismissed, that is to say he's out from underneath this, he has been exonerated, then Michael Flynn can turn around and countersue for discovery, and he can get recordings and transcripts of everything that went on in that Oval Office. That is knowable. That stuff has not been scrubbed, and if it has been tampered with, then everyone associated with that is going to be impeached. But wait, he's no longer president. Doesn't matter. You can still be impeached after you're out of office. It means you lose your retirement. You're stripped of your title. You're stripped of Secret Service protection. And you could possibly go to prison. You could be prosecuted for obstruction of justice. Same thing Nixon. Remember the 18 missing minutes on the tape? That's why he was impeached, not for what went on the tapes. He personally directed this. The first targets, of course, Flynn and the incoming Attorney General, who was forced to recuse himself, Jeff Sessions, from oversight of investigations of President Trump. At each major point in the operation, explosive media leaks were a key strategy in the operation to take Trump down. The real information about Russia was withheld from the Trump team under Obama's direction. His leaks and ambushes made the transition chaotic. I know, I was there. I went to the Trump Tower myself. I saw the feeding frenzy between the election and the inauguration. I saw the frantic search for cabinet members who were willing to suffer the slings and arrows of the Democrat assassins. When Comey was finally fired on May 9th, in part for his duplicitous regarding his handling of the Russia collusion theory, he orchestrated the launch of a special counsel probe that continued his efforts for another 2 years. That probe ended in a complete disaster, with Mueller finding no evidence and having no clue of any American colluding with Russia to steal the 2016 election, much less Trump or anyone connected to him. An analysis of the timeline from early 2017 shows a clear pattern of behavior. from these federal officials running the collusion operation against the Trump campaign. That is treason. Those are acts of sedition. That carries with it the penalty of capital punishment. It also shows how essential media leaks were to their strategy to sideline key law enforcement and intelligence officials and to cripple the ability of the incoming Trump administration to run the country. Still, in spite of all that, yes, that's true. Williams says strip abomination wasn't ever president in the first place. That's a good point. It's a good point. Because you ever notice how strange it is that all these Democrats, and I mean a lot of them, like a dozen of the top names, including Kamala Harris, including others, Barack Obama and others, they're operating under assumed names. They're all operating under assumed names. Who does that? Anybody in the chat room have an assumed name? I mean, I'm running on the name Brooks Agnew because I'm Brooks Agnew. I've always been Brooks Agnew. I was born Brooks Agnew. Everything I do is Brooks Agnew. All my social media is Brooks Agnew. Why would anybody change their name, especially to run for public office? Right? I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, the memes have been going kind of crazy today. Harris just lends herself to all kinds of derogatory things. And we may talk a little bit about this. I know. Obama, I get it. Obama, I get it. We'll cover some more of that. Here's a timeline of the key moments that you need to be aware of. And I don't want you to forget it, okay? We're not tearing down this statue and sweeping it under the rug and hosing the blood into the gutter the way the Clinton crime syndicate does. We want to keep this alive. And that's why we're broadcasting live tonight on 5 different platforms. Because I want as many people to hear this as possible. This is actually what happened. On January 4th, 2017, Trump has been elected, but he has not been inaugurated. Obama is still in office. Obama still has the keys to the kingdom. He can still issue orders, and he is doing it. Following the closure of a pretextually dubious and political motivated FBI investigation of Flynn, it was done at the beginning of January. The leadership of the FBI scrambled to reopen a case against Flynn, the man who, in his role as National Security Advisor, would have to review their Russia collusion investigation. In other words, they would be discovered by the very man they were trying to take out. FBI officials openly discussed their concern about briefing the veteran intelligence official on what they had done to the Trump campaign and transition team. They spied on them while they were still candidates. And I maintain, Earth Explorers, that they also spied on Ted Cruz. And they also spied on Mr. Kasich. Yeah. Know why? Of course you know why. Because in early 2016, when this was still going on, they had not decided who the nominee was. Not till May 26th. Early in 2016, they had spies inside their campaigns. They thought Ted Cruz might become the nominee. He had a pathway, right? Had a pathway to the number of delegates you need in order to get the nomination. Trump didn't have it secured yet. They had spies inside of Ted Cruz's campaign. They had spies inside of John Kasich's campaign. And they had spies inside the Trump campaign. This is not legal. This is not legal. You cannot order and use the intelligence agencies of the United States of America, the most powerful, most sophisticated intelligence agencies the world has ever known, against your own president, against the election system. That makes Watergate look like a walk in the Watergate Hotel. Nothing compared to that. Flynn had to be dealt with because he knew where the bodies were buried. He knew where the Clinton crime syndicate had hosed the blood. He knew all this. He was inside their organization. The FBI's top counterintelligence official would later memorialize discussions about the FBI's attempts to get General Flynn fired. No reopening was needed. They determined when they discovered that they had failed to close the previous investigation. They found this mistake amazing and serendipitously good and said, our utter incompetence actually helps us. Even more noteworthy were texts from FBI's number 2 counterintelligence official Peter Strzok to FBI lawyer and late-night Chinese food compatriot Lisa Page, noting that the 7th floor, the fun place, referred to, was a reference to Comey and his deputy director, Andrew McCabe, that they were running the floor. That's where the 7th floor is the upper echelon FBI. That's what was going on. Yes. It's true. Boo makes a very good point. You remember when John Kasich was being interviewed, and he let slip that John McCain had just passed away, right? Sudden brain cancer. He decides to retire, and then 24 hours later, he did, right? He's room temperature. And we thought, oh, wow, that was fast, but I mean, that was really fast, wasn't it? And we kind of said, oh, well, he did have cancer, but it was kind of fast. Well, turns out Kasich let slip, and I quote, he was just put to death. John McCain was just put to death. Who says that? I mean, you don't even, you put your animal to sleep. You let a sick person die. He expired. He passed away. Put to death? Oh, he didn't slip. It wasn't Freudian. He didn't say, oh, no, wait, I misspoke. Carried right on, and the most peculiar thing about it was the guy that was interviewing him said, what? What did you say? John McCain was put to death? No, didn't say. Nobody asked him about that. We caught it. Eric says he's heard that rumor. Yeah, it was during the news interview. We watched it. We turned to each other and said, what did he say? Did he just say John McCain was put to death? See, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. Players dying. I mean, there were people dying every other day in this saga. January 5th, the next day. Yates, Comey, CIA Director John Brennan, badass. Communist. He's a mean dude. And Director of National Intelligence James the Liar Clapper briefed Obama on Russia-related matters in the Oval Office. By the way, China Joe Biden and Susan Rice were also there. After the Obama, but she didn't know nothing about nothing, right? Yeah. High Ivy League graduate, served on the Brookings Institute, national security advisor for most of these years. She didn't know nothing from nothing. I believe her not. After the Obama briefing, the intel, and by the way, everybody knew their job after that. Everybody knew their job. There was no ambivalence, no ambiguity. The intelligence chiefs who would be leaving at the end of the term were dismissed. In other words, the political appointees. And Yates and Comey, who would continue in the Trump administration, asked to stay. Not only did Obama give us guidance about how to perpetuate the Russia collusion theory investigations, he also talked about General Flynn's conversations with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, which, by the way, he had been in Washington for a long time. He was a fixture. He was a Russian fixture. He was definitely Russian, maybe post-Soviet, but he knew everybody and everybody knew him, and he was the ultimate in bureaucratic politics. He knew the protocols. He had the best meetings. Everything ran smoothly. They killed him. They killed Kislyak. He was never able to testify in any of the Flynn litigations because he was dead. And they killed 4 other Russian ambassadors around the world, too. They killed them all. That's how serious they were playing. According to both Comey and Yates, interestingly, Clapper, Comey, and Yates all said that they did not brief Obama about these phone calls. We know that's a lie. Clapper testified he did not brief Obama on the calls. Yates learned about the calls from Obama himself during that meeting. Already knew. Why? Because he was wiretapping them. Because he was listening in on the calls. That's why. And Comey also testified he didn't brief Obama about the calls, even though the intelligence was an FBI product. They were tapping him. They were listening to the calls. And Obama was either listening in or getting the transcripts on a daily basis. He briefed them. Susan Rice, who publicly lied but later admitted under oath to her widespread use of unmasked intelligence at the end of the Obama administration, likely briefed Obama on the calls and would have had access to the intelligence. Comey mentions the Logan Act at this meeting. Nobody has ever been prosecuted. Logan Act. It's been around since like 1799. It was designed to keep government officials from going to foreign countries and lobbying or working against the policies of the sitting president. That's why the Logan Act was put in place. Do government officials do that? Hell yes, they do it. Absolutely. Pelosi's done it. Schiff has done it. Schumer's done it. Valerie Jarrett went to Iran several times. Of course, government officials worked against the activities of the sitting president. It was in this meeting that Rice memorialized a bizarre Inauguration Day email to herself. You ever write an email to yourself? Note to self, hey, you better get this in writing. I need a date stamp on this. And it claimed that Obama told the gathered people in that meeting to do everything by the book. Rice also noted in her email that the key point of that discussion in that meeting was whether and how withhold national security information, not only from Michael Flynn, but from President Trump himself. Yes, they withheld the information from Trump and from his national security team. That's treason. Those are acts of sedition. What is that? I heard an image of their worst deed was in those envelopes. That's why the the envelopes that were handed out at Daddy Bush's funeral. Yeah, the worst of their deeds was in those envelopes. And when they opened them, you remember the shocked look on their faces? Not Hillary. I mean, she's a stone cold killer. But when Laura Bush opened it, and when Jeb Bush saw what was in it, did you see the looks on their face? You should go watch the YouTubes. It's kind of crazy. They opened it. It was like there is either pictures in there, or there were short sentences like, I know what you did last. But anyway, there was a big, bad, shocked look on their face. Yeah, I saw that too. I don't know if Laura Bush was the brains in the family or not. Many people think she was the conscience of the family. Difficult to say. I think she was well liked as a first lady. It's a little shocking to me that she was as well informed in that family as she was, without saying or doing anything. Let's go to the next day, January 6th. An ostensibly similar briefing about Russian interference efforts during the 2016 campaign was given to President-elect Trump. At that briefing, and this briefing was given by Comey Chameleon himself, he privately briefed Trump on the most salacious and absurd, the PP tape, which was totally fabricated, completely made up by the Clinton crime syndicate, and fabricated through Christopher Steele. I always thought Christopher Steele was a really cool name for a secret agent, right? If you're going to have an MI6 agent, you're going to call him Christopher Steele, right? What's your name? Steele. Christopher Steele. See, it's a martini name. It is. It's a martini name. Maybe with a little more vermouth, but it's definitely a martini name. It's kind of corny, actually. Brad Smith, not a secret agent name, but Christopher Steele. Yeah. And it wasn't just a Christopher Steele report. Oh, no. It had to be a dossier. How many times have you heard the word dossier in the last 4 years? If I had $1, I could retire as many times as I've heard the word dossier. It could be, yes, free miles per gallon. That's an individual in the YouTube chat room says, probably a fake name. Really? You think so? I don't know. I got to kind of take it for I mean, everybody in the Democrat Party is running on a fake name. Maybe him too. But I'm just thinking, what is our little boy going to be when he grows up? Oh, I think he's going to be a secret agent. Well, let's call him Christopher Steele. One day, he'll write a dossier. You watch. Yeah. Anyway, it was used to obtain a FISA warrant. That's a foreign intelligence special access or a surveillance authorization. It's done by a three-panel judge, a three-judge panel, and that is a rotated panel based on a group of judges that serve on that court. And what the judges do is they review the warrant, and 100% of the time, they approve the warrant. The warrant is because they want to do foreign intelligence surveillance. In other words, we got this Russian guy, we got this Ukrainian guy. We want to listen to his phone calls. He might be talking to somebody in this country. We need to listen to what he's saying. See? But in doing that, you can listen to that guy because he's outside the United States and you just need that warrant. But the reason you need the FISA warrant is because there's an American on the phone call. He's calling some guy in New Jersey. He's calling some guy in New York. He's calling some guy in Indiana, whatever. You have an American on the line, but they realize that they're kind of violating the 4th and 10th Amendments here because we have a right to be not illegally searched or surveilled, right? So they call him American number 1 or American number 2. But you can go to this special room in person and you can sign into this log and you can say, I am one of the 17 people on this list and I want to unmask this American. I need to know who this American is so that we can surveil him a little closer and find out if he's, doing something with this Russian guy or this Ukrainian guy or this Chinese guy. And the court will usually, or in that room, they'll say, okay, we'll lift the paper for you and you can see who it is. And so you see that it's Wacko McGillicuddy, or it's John Smith, or it's, oh my gosh, it's Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn is the person, and I can't believe that he's talking to this Russian guy. But wait a minute. He like the national security advisor. He's supposed to be talking to this guy. I know. But see, the guy's Russian. So what it did is it allowed them then to listen to Michael Flynn talk to President Trump. Oops. Now you're tapping into presidential phone calls. And that's what this whole stink is about. So in order to get a little closer, they wanted to get into what some of the other agencies are doing, like the CIA. And one of the individuals at the CIA former CIA, was Carter Page, very smart guy, very good asset. Comey told Trump he was telling him because CNN was looking for any reason it could to publish a story about Russia having compromising information on him, and he wanted to warn Trump about it. Did not mention the dossier was completely unverified or that it was the product of a secretly funded operation by the Clinton crime syndicate and the DNC. Left that little detail out. Ruined Carter Page's life, which, by the way, Carter Page is now countersuing, and he's about to ruin their life. What is this? Okay. Yes. Something about the skull and bones, and yes, we could go into all that, but I want to stick to the guns here. January 10th, 4 days later. This is important. In an amazing coincidence, CNN found the excuse to publish. They actually published the Russia claims after a high-level Obama intelligence operative leaked that Comey had briefed Trump about the RAG, the report, the dossier. The selective leak, which was credulously accepted by CNN reporters Evan Perez and Jim Sciutto, Jake Tapper, and Carl Bernstein, may have seen the most important step in the operation to harm the incoming Trump administration. The leak of the briefing of Trump was used to legitimize a ridiculous dossier full of allegations. The FBI already knew it was false. They had multiple news organizations that had previously refused to report on it for lack of substantiation, and they created a cloud of suspicion over Trump's campaign and administration by insinuating he was being blackmailed by Russia. And we lived with it for 3 years. And we spent $50-some-odd million having a show about it every single day in the mainstream media. 2 days later, January 12th, this is, I was at Trump Tower before this. I was in Trump Tower in December. The next part of the strategy was the explosive leak to David Ignatius of the Washington Post to legitimize the use against Flynn of the Logan Act. And like I said, it was a crazy law put in place in 1799. It's never been used. Anyway, Ignatius accepted the leak from the Obama official. He wrote that Flynn had called Kislyak. What did Flynn say? And did it undercut the U.S. sanctions? The Logan Act, though never enforced, bars U.S. citizens from correspondence intended to influence a foreign government about disputes with the United States. And was its spirit violated? Well, I think Flynn kind of called their bluff. And he's a pretty tough guy. He knew they didn't have any grounds to stand on, so they blackmailed him. They said, if you don't plead guilty to this, we're going to ruin your son's life. He's not guilty of anything, but we don't care. We will use terroristic litigation against him, and we will destroy him, and we will destroy you. So if you want to save your son, you will plead guilty to lying to us. And that's what happened. That's what happened. The 23rd, a couple weeks later, another important criminal leak was given to Ellen Nakashima and Greg Miller of the Washington Post, also based on criminal leaks. Their article headlined, FBI reviewed Flynn's calls with Russian ambassador but found nothing illicit. It was intended to make Flynn feel safe, to put him at ease about the FBI stance on those calls the day before they planned to ambush him in an interview. The article was used to publicize false information when it said, quote, although Flynn's contacts with Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak were listened to, Flynn himself is not the active target of an investigation, U.S. officials said. So Flynn's going to say, wait a minute, they listened to my phone conversation with Kislyak? Gosh, what did I say? I didn't record it myself, but I kind of remember what I said, but do I remember the exact words? Well, maybe not, but I think it was pretty official, and I think it was pretty benign. I mean, we just talked about, appointments and glad to meet him and happy to be on board. And I don't think there was anything nefarious about it at all, but they were listening. That means they're listening to everything. So what it did is it made Flynn gun shy. Okay? Emails prior to this date confirmed Flynn was their prime target. This article was later cited by Andy McCabe as the reason why they were justified in concealing from Flynn the real purpose for their interview. Flynn later asked McCabe if he knew how all the information about his phone calls had been made public and whether it had been leaked. He didn't want to say. I'm just telling you that he was gun shy. He knew at that point that he was the target of their investigation. And the next day, January 24th, Comey later admitted he broke every protocol to send agents to interview Flynn and try to catch him in a lie. FBI officials strategized how to keep Flynn from knowing he was a target, investigation, or asking for an attorney to represent him in the interview. January 23rd, Washington Post article, which falsely stated that Flynn was not an FBI target, was key to that strategy. Make him feel at ease. We're just a bunch of guys here. We're looking forward to working with you in the future. Hey, look at these hallways at the Pentagon. Ain't this, do I need a lawyer? Nah, lawyer. How about those Braves, huh? And one thing led to another. Although the interviewing agents said they could detect no tells indicating he lied, and he carefully phrased everything in the interview because he, as I said, was gun shy. He later was induced to plead guilty to lying in this interview. It was because White House official downplayed the Kislyak phone calls, presumably in light of what Flynn had told them about the calls. Gates would go to the White House the next day and insinuate Flynn should probably be fired. February 9th, the strategy to get Flynn fired didn't immediately work. So another leak was deployed to Greg Miller, Adam Entos, and Ellen Nakashima of the Washington Post. And that article, which was headlined, National Security Advisor Flynn discussed sanctions with Russian ambassador, despite denials, officials say. It was sourced to people who happened to share senior FBI leadership's views on the Logan Act. This article was also based on criminal leaks of top secret information of phone call intercepts and laid out the FBI's case for why Flynn's contacts with a foreign adversary were a problem, even though he was the incoming national security advisor. The fact that such phone calls are routine, not to mention Flynn's case that improved relations with Russia in a world where China, North Korea, and Iran were posing increasing threats, never made it into these articles for context. So the 13th, the operation finally succeeded, getting Flynn fired and rendering him unable to review the operations against the Trump campaign, Trump transition team, and the Trump administration. I maintain on this program tonight that every official in that January 5th meeting needs to be raided by the FBI. Libraries of evidence was removed and covered up during the weeks between the election and the inauguration. And that information belongs to us. I believe it will reveal the crimes worthy of treason. That is the reason for the treason. So let me talk about this story a little bit, because we're talking a lot about privileges, and we're talking about how important it is to be one color or another in order to be part of this administration. It's proposed administration. And it's funny that Millie-Vanilla, that's what I call him, Millie-Vanilla, the lip-syncing campaign of the not African-American woman of color, hashtag heels up Harris. That'll say it all right there. Obama and Biden. And I knew it was going to be this all along. I didn't think it would be Rice. Rice has way too much baggage, and they don't want to dig into that baggage because there are dead bodies in that baggage. Kamala Harris is just trash. That's all there is to it. However, It is the emphasis on skin color that I find most telling about this strategy. And I selected this story. It was written by a white woman, a white girl. And she quotes Martin Luther King, and I quote, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Close quote. These were the words of one of the most prolific civil rights activists in our nation's pacifist. How is it in the current climate of demanding racial equality, we've done a complete 180 away from this and are instead attacking people again based on the color of their skin? While there are steps that need to be taken to address racism and prejudice against Black Americans in this country, there's always a threshold where progressivism inevitably becomes regressive in one way or another. There's always a threshold where this goes the wrong way. The current narrative surrounding racial equality seems to have reached that point by suggesting that the only way for white people to help the Black community is by bowing down to an angry mob and taking accountability for the sins of their ancestors. And I refuse to be a self-deprecating white girl for sins I never committed. The fact that every race and society in history has owned slaves is beside the point. Of all colors, by the way. The first slaves to come to this country in 1619, they were white. In order to stand against inequality, we must stand against the harmful demonization of any group based on skin color. Any group. Because it will ultimately lead to further inequality and division. And we are not divided. We are one people. We are Americans. Discrimination is the antithesis of empowerment. And she says, "I refuse to have all of the progress made for women's empowerment stripped away from me simply because my skin is the wrong color." You could argue that your ancestors never owned slaves, but it's a moot point because no one even asks. The more significant point is that even if your ancestors owned slaves, which Kamala Harris's did actually own slaves, they were big slave holders, you personally do not. And the only conduct we're responsible for in this life is our own. We don't pass the sins of the fathers on to the children. Just as we don't hold the families or descendants of criminals today responsible for paying for their relatives' sins. We shouldn't hold all white people who were never slave owners accountable for paying reparations to people who were never slaves. Imagine if we had demonized and ordered the Columbine shooters' mothers to pay monetary compensation to the victims' family members. The average present-day American, regardless of race, abhors racism and decries discrimination when they see compelling evidence of it. Therefore, it is illogical and perhaps unethical to use the power of government to mandate white people to both apologize and pay reparations for the actions of their ancestors during the birth of our nation. The only conduct we're responsible for in this life is ours. Apart from government-mandated reparations being forced to stand trial in front of the court of public opinion for sins you didn't commit, should be rejected. A viral video making its rounds on the internet recently showed white Christians kneeling down to Black parishioners to apologize for their ancestors' sins. It's a ridiculous standard to hold people to, even outside of religion. One could even argue that it's inherently anti-Christian, given the Bible's assertions that children are not accountable for the sins of their father. Though the point of this article is not a theological discussion on the way the Bible says we should handle race relations, it speaks to a large point that not punishing people for sins they didn't commit has been a principle of those seeking virtue and righteousness for many centuries, should be one to hold. If the goal is equality, why are all people, especially celebrities and leaders, not held to the same standard in terms of punishment when it comes to violating laws? Why don't we have equal protection under the law? Why don't we have government officials that have committed heinous crimes arrested and put in jail? Because they're high-level government officials. That is wrong. War is justice denied. The worst civil rights violations in our nation's history have happened when we have tried to determine who is or who isn't worthy enough to be considered a person. Thank you, Mover, on behalf of Mona. Mona's out there in the chat room, and Moverling just made a donation on her behalf in the top chat, and I appreciate it. Everyone here appreciates it. Thank you so much for your support. Recently, Nick Cannon was dropped from CBS. Yeah, after his, quote, anti-Semitic comments. At first glance, it seems like a win, right, for fighting discrimination. But Cannon made even more egregious comments about white people that were not mentioned in CBS's statement on his firing. Despite Cannon saying that white people have less empathy and liken them to animals because of their lack of melanin, these comments were a non-issue in the eyes of the public and the entertainment industry. Celebrities and community leaders, they can read lines, they look good on camera, and they make it socially acceptable to treat white people as inferior subhumans. Even Seth Rogen just announced that he is actively trying to make less things starring white people. Seriously? A co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Toronto, argued that white people are recessive genetic defects. But any celebrity who dares to speak out against the rising racial supremacist sentiment coming from the Black Lives Matter movement, and it is a movement, it isn't a business, it isn't even recognized by the IRS, it doesn't exist. In fact, if you put Antifa.com in your browser, it's going to take you to the Biden campaign. You see where this is just insanity. It's just insanity. Terry Crews experienced backlash for expressing his concern about the dangerous self-righteousness stemming out of Black Lives Matter, where people were really viewed themselves as better. These few voices of reason in the echo chamber of Hollywood are silenced. They are berated. They're deemed harmful to racial equality. They're simply not woke enough. The silencing and bullying of those who refuse to accept an anti-white sentiment extends beyond celebrities and leaders. It has become something that none of us in the modern era can escape from, with every major social media platform taking aggressive action to force people into conformity. If you were on Instagram at any time during the first week of June, you almost certainly saw or maybe engaged in the worldwide trend of posting a black square to stand against racism. Now, while this in itself is not harmful, white people who chose not to participate or even gave a respectful critique of the trend, they were deemed racist. How does promoting or silencing people based solely on the color of their skin actually promote racial equity? Instagram also approved and published a Mute White People sticker for users to post on their stores. In the same month, TikTok announced it would be promoting black creators. Similarly, YouTube announced $100 million, a fund to amplify voices of black creators. From a basic definitional standpoint, how does promoting or silencing people just based on the color of their skin actually promote racial equity. These are mob rule trends, and they're harmful to a republic. Another popular accusation thrown at white Americans is that white people have no culture, or what we do is stolen from someone else. Phrases like white people have no culture, or white people are bland. From a logical perspective, she says, I struggle with understanding why it's racist for one race to be proud of their culture and not another. Every other race except white people is allowed to be proud of their culture and heritage without losing their jobs or their reputations. The text of the New Testament was written in ancient Greek. It was later translated to the benefit of all mankind. The gods of Norse and Greek mythology served as inspiration of strength in times of struggle and taught socially beneficial virtues like honor and hospitality. European philosophers inspired the very text which declared all men to be equal regardless of race, color, or creed, despite the global practices of the time. Abraham Lincoln, a white man, born and raised in Kentucky, freed the slaves on the logical soapbox that was crafted by white thinkers such as John Locke, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison. Every other race except white people is allowed to be proud of their culture and heritage, just like everybody else in this world should be able to be proud of their heritage. I am, because my life matters just as much as any other life. I should be held accountable for when I do wrong to others, but never for the crimes of people who lived hundreds of years before me. While women have found equality in this country, she says, it's not always this way. We fought a long and hard battle to be considered worthy of decent treatment. I refuse to have that progress taken away from me and be made to feel inferior once again for something else I can't control. The color of my skin. My voice, my thoughts, my experiences are not inferior to anyone of another race, simply because I am white. The way to fight racism and inequality is not by demanding that another race accept itself as inferior and evil, but to hold everyone to the same standard regardless of the color of their skin. My voice, my thoughts, and my experiences are not inferior to anyone of another race simply because I am white. I tend to agree with that. I will openly, publicly, and immediately bring attention to the fact that you're making a case based solely on the color of my skin. I will pit my character against me and me alone. I am competing with Brooks Agnew. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose. I will not be compared to other people based on the color of my skin. Neither should you. This is X Squared. This is X Squared Radio, coming to you live from the America Free Radio Studios, somewhere east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. In here, the results are always positive. We might go past your imagination, but you never have any fear. You'll always be traveling safely. Me. Follow me on social media. Doing so will treat, cure, and prevent the disease of ignorance. It's been my pleasure to be with you tonight on all the media that I could pull together at one time. Thank you so much. And don't forget to like, share, and please subscribe at youtube.com/Brooks Agnew. My website, brooksagnew.com. Brooksagnew.com will be in the description down here at the bottom of my YouTube tonight, and you will be able to access that anytime. Thank you so much for being part of the program. And don't forget, go look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. Before long, you will have saved the planet. Peace, Earth Explorers.